Welcome, dear listener, to another tranquil tale from the Sleep Atlas. Tonight, allow your body to settle beneath the gentle weight of your covers and let your mind drift slowly into the quiet rhythms of a faraway world. We'll begin our journey in a forgotten land where the air is soft as silk and the nights glow with the shimmer of 1,000 lanterns. Chapter 1: The Garden of Whispers. The night had fallen softly over the hills of Umara. In this quiet corner of the empire, the sun never truly vanished. It only faded into the arms of the moon, leaving behind a sky the color of melted indigo. A pale hush settled over the valley, wrapping every branch and blossom in gentle stillness. High above the city walls, nestled within a royal courtyard, the Garden of Whispers lay in full bloom. It was said the garden was planted by a queen who dreamed of silence. No birds sang there, no fountains gurgled, and even the wind passed lightly through its silken leaves. The petals never rustled, and the grass never cracked underfoot. Everything within its stone walls was designed for quiet dreaming. Tonight, the moon hung low over Umara. Wide and pearlescent, it poured its light like milk over the lantern trees, those tall, spiral-trunked beings with translucent fruit that glowed when touched by night. They shimmered now, every branch twinkling with globes of gentle gold and smoky silver, as if the stars themselves had chosen to rest a while in their limbs. And beneath these trees, wrapped in a shawl of cream-colored silk, sat a young girl named Sumi. Her eyes, slow and thoughtful, traced the arc of the moon above the temple roofs. She did not speak. She never did in the garden. Words felt too heavy, too sharp for this place. Instead, she simply breathed, long, soft inhales, even longer, slower exhales. She placed one hand flat upon the moss beside her, the other resting gently on her chest. She closed her eyes and listened to nothing. And in that nothing, everything whispered. The Garden of Whispers was older than anyone could remember. Even the palace archivists, with their scrolls and glass memory bells, had no record of its beginning. It simply had always been. The emperors came and went, as did wars and winters, but the garden remained unchanged, unhurried. Sumi had found the garden by accident, years ago, chasing a paper kite across the palace roofs. A gust of wind had taken the kite, and she had followed, clambering over quiet walkways and past stone fox statues until the wind had died, and the silence had begun. She remembered stepping barefoot through its gate for the first time. The change was immediate. No footsteps, no echo, just breath and earth and moonlight. And then, the lanterns. At first, she had thought they were fruits, but they pulsed and flickered like breath. Some floated mid-air, tethered by invisible strings. Others bobbed gently within pools of water, lined with smooth obsidian stones. That first night, she had stayed until morning, curled at the base of a whispering cherry tree, dreaming of things she did not yet know. Ever since, she returned often, sometimes for an hour, sometimes until the stars blinked out one by one into dawn. The garden asked nothing of her. It gave her no tasks, no questions. It simply waited and breathed. That night, as Sumi sat beneath her favorite tree, a weeping blossom whose flowers opened only to moonlight, she reached out to one of the lanterns. It floated just within reach, a round and gentle orb the size of her palm. Its glow was faint, as if asleep. She cupped it with both hands, and it stirred. A soft, pulsing warmth traveled through her fingers. The light brightened slightly, glowing a warm, creamy hue, neither yellow nor white, but something softer, something in between. It vibrated gently in her hands, not with sound, but with feeling like a memory trying to form. Sumi closed her eyes and breathed. She felt the moss under her legs, cool and pillowy. The smell of night jasmine lingered in the air. The wind brushed past, as light as a silk ribbon drawn across the skin. The lantern pulsed again, once, then twice, and then it rose. Not from her hands, but from within them, as if remembering how to float. It lifted upward and spun once in the air, slowly, like a leaf falling in reverse. Then it drifted toward the center of the garden. Sumi watched as it joined dozens of other lanterns now waking under the moonlight, rising together like a soft tide of stars returning to the sky. She smiled and stayed very still. Few knew this, but the Garden of Whispers had a keeper. Not a gardener, not a guard, but someone far older, quieter. Her name was Aya. No one had ever seen her arrive or leave. She simply was. A silver-haired woman with eyes like wet clay and a robe the color of faded parchment. She never spoke above a whisper, and her steps were quieter than dust. She never walked directly towards Sumi, never disturbed her, never asked anything. But she always appeared somewhere nearby, trimming a branch with golden shears, dusting a moss-covered rock, pouring rainwater from a porcelain bowl into the roots of a lantern tree. Tonight, Sumi saw her across the garden, crouched beside a basin of lotus blossoms. She was humming, not aloud, but somewhere deeper, like a song you remember in your bones, a vibration in the stillness. Sumi felt it too, that hum, and it soothed her. She closed her eyes again and let the music settle beneath her ribs, where it joined her breathing in a quiet rhythm. In and out and in again. There was a bench in the garden, made not of stone or wood, but woven reeds and pressed clouds. It was never cold. Sumi sometimes lay there when she felt too much inside. Tonight, she walked toward it. Each step was slow, deliberate, bare feet pressing gently into moss that gave way like memory foam. The bench was beneath a canopy of silver-barked trees, their leaves shaped like stars, their trunks wrapped in ivy that glowed faintly blue. As she reached the bench, she felt the warmth of the cushion rise to meet her. It accepted her weight like it had been waiting. She lay on her side, arms folded close, and looked up. Above her, the lanterns continued to drift, slow as thought, silent as sleep. She did not think of tomorrow. She did not think of anything. Just breath, just glow, just now. And slowly, the night deepened, the garden dimmed, the stars seemed closer, and Sumi slept. Chapter 2. The Days Between. Morning arrived slowly, not with blaring sunlight, but with a softening of the darkness, a pale mist rising from the lake as if the earth itself was exhaling. Thomas stirred gently, wrapped in flannel and silence, blinking into the drowsy gray light that filtered through the cabin's window. The smell of dew and pine drifted in, and somewhere, a loon called across the water in a long, echoing note that seemed to stretch the moment like taffy. He rose without hurry. Each step across the creaking wooden floor felt like a continuation of a dream, rather than a departure from it. He lit the stove and brewed coffee slowly, the aroma blooming into the room like a memory. He sipped it on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the lake shift from silver to pale blue as the mist curled and vanished. The days that followed unfolded not in a rush, but like the pages of an old journal, quiet, faded, comforting. He walked along the wooded trails behind the cabin, his boots brushing fallen needles and soft moss. He noticed the rhythm of the woods, the way the light dabbled through the canopy, how the air changed subtly from one clearing to the next. Birds flickered from branch to branch, and squirrels darted across stones like skipping thoughts. He found himself moving slower than usual, not because of fatigue, but because there was no reason to hurry. No appointments, no notifications. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the distant babble of a brook weaving through fern-covered rocks. In the afternoons, he read books by the fire-well-worn volumes he found stacked on an old shelf, their pages softened by time. Titles he'd never heard of, authors long forgotten, but the stories felt familiar, like voices from another time whispering gently into the present. Sometimes he'd nap without planning to, drifting off on the couch as sunlight spilled across the floor, only to wake to the golden hush of early evening. He cooked simple meals with whatever he had brought: bread, cheese, root vegetables. The act of preparing food became a meditation, a ritual in patience. The smell of roasted rosemary, of sizzling butter, became another kind of language. In the evenings, he sat by the lake. The sun would slip low, painting the water with amber and rose. Dragonflies skimmed the surface, and frogs began their songs in the reeds. He didn't always think or reflect or even wonder. Sometimes he just watched, just breathed, just was. He began to recognize the regular visitors, the heron that moved like a shadow through the shallows, the fox that paused near the edge of the clearing before vanishing silently into the trees. Each presence felt like a quiet blessing, a nod from the land that he belonged, if only for a while. Nights were cool and star-brushed. The cabin glowed softly from within, a single lamp casting long golden shadows. He'd sit with a mug of tea and watch the flames in the fireplace curl and twist. The crackle of burning pine, the sigh of the wind outside, the rustle of branches, it all mingled into a lullaby without words. Sleep came easily here. It arrived not like a command, but an invitation. And Thomas accepted it gratefully, letting the darkness fold over him like a soft, heavy quilt, his breath steady, his mind quiet, as the world turned slowly beneath the blanket of night. Chapter 3. Echoes in Stillness. The third morning arrived with a gentle drizzle. Not the kind that chills or soaks, but a soft curtain of mist and droplets that tapped lightly on the cabin roof like nature's own lullaby. Thomas woke to the rhythm, his eyes still heavy, and lay for a while listening. There was something comforting about the way the rain blended with the quiet, as if even the forest were speaking in hushed tones. When he finally rose, he wrapped himself in a thick sweater and padded barefoot to the window. Outside, the lake was smooth like glass, painted in soft grays and silver light. Ripples spread where raindrops kissed the surface, and the trees around it stood like ancient watchmen cloaked in morning fog. He made oatmeal on the stove, stirring slowly as steam rose in lazy spirals. He ate near the fireplace, where a low flame kept the chill at bay, and each bite felt warm in a way that reached deeper than his bones. That day, he stayed close to the cabin. He walked the perimeter slowly, umbrella in hand, although the drizzle was barely more than a mist against his face. He inspected mossy logs, ran his fingers over bark softened by time, and paused often to simply watch how the rain beaded on leaves and dripped in slow motion from the edges. Time, it seemed, didn't just move slowly here. It forgot to move at all. Back indoors, he spent hours rearranging a small reading nook beside the window. He stacked cushions, moved a chair to catch the best view, and laid a quilt over the armrest. With a book on his lap and the forest beyond the glass, he read for hours, though sometimes he simply stared outside, following the winding path of raindrops as they slithered down the pane. In the late afternoon, the rain began to fade. The clouds lifted just enough for a blush of pale sunlight to bathe the lake, and the air turned golden, still carrying the freshness of wet earth and pine. Thomas took a thermos of warm tea and sat again on the porch. The world around him had the hush of a cathedral. Even the birds were quiet, as though they too were in a kind of reverent pause. Across the water, mist hovered just above the surface, curling in low spirals that danced and shifted in the light. It reminded him of breath slow, steady, and alive. A heron landed near the edge of the lake, its wings outstretched like an offering. It stood still for minutes, then moved with deliberate grace, stepping through the shallows as if time itself bent around its path. Later, as dusk settled in, a soft wind moved through the pines, brushing the needles into song. Thomas watched the sky turn to deep violet, and stars blinked into view like old memories. He remained outside until the cold gently nudged him back indoors. That night, he added an extra log to the fire and let its warmth seep into every corner of the room. Shadows flickered on the walls like gentle dancers, and the scent of smoke and cedar filled the air. He journaled for a while, not about thoughts or plans, but simple observations. The way the lake changed color in the rain, how silence could have texture, how peace could be found in the smallest breath. Sleep came with ease, like a leaf drifting down from a high branch. Outside, the forest breathed on, quiet and deep, holding its secrets and offering its calm to anyone willing to listen. Chapter 4. Beneath the Pines. The fourth day began with sunlight filtering through a veil of mist, casting golden patterns on the wooden floorboards of the cabin. Thomas stirred slowly, stretching beneath the warmth of his blanket as birds began their soft morning chorus outside. The air held a quiet promise, the kind that lingers in the space between dreams and waking. He stepped outside with a cup of tea cradled in both hands, his breath forming gentle clouds in the cool dawn air. The lake shimmered faintly, still recovering from the night, its surface smooth and pale as moonlight. The trees surrounding it stood tall and silent, their reflections wavering ever so slightly in the ripples of a morning breeze. Today, he decided, would be for wandering, not with destination or purpose, but with an open heart and steady feet. He followed a barely visible trail behind the cabin, where the forest thickened and the light grew softer, more filtered, like sunlight seen through antique glass. The path was lined with moss so thick it muffled every step, and the silence here was deeper, gentler, as if the woods themselves were listening. He walked slowly, stopping often. He admired how delicate ferns unfurled from the earth, how mushrooms in shades of cream and rust peeked out from damp soil, how a single spiderweb caught the light like a string of tiny pearls. Every detail felt intentional, crafted by time and patience. He came upon a small clearing where a stream whispered over smooth stones, weaving its way between roots and fallen leaves. Thomas sat on a flat rock by the water's edge, watching as sunlight danced across its surface. He dipped his fingers into the cold flow and let the chill anchor him in the moment. A dragonfly hovered nearby, its wings catching every shade of green and blue in the shifting light. For a long time, he remained there listening to the water, to the faint creak of trees swaying above, to the quiet song of a world content in its stillness. On his way back, he paused to rest against the trunk of an old pine. Its bark was warm from the sun, and he leaned into it as though against a friend. Eyes closed, he could feel the tree's heartbeat slow, rooted, eternal. Back at the cabin, he made a light lunch and ate it on the porch with bare feet resting on sun-warmed wood. He watched a pair of turtles sunbathe on a rock near the lake's edge, their stillness matching his own. The hours passed like clouds drifting, reshaping, always soft. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of peach and indigo, he lit a lantern and carried it down to the dock. He sat at the edge with his feet dangling over the water, the wood beneath him creaking gently with every movement. The lake had turned to a mirror, and the first stars shimmered in its depths, like jewels lost in time. He whispered a thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to the silence, the trees, the sky, to the space he had found here, and the part of himself that had reawakened. Later, wrapped in his blanket with the lantern casting a soft golden halo, he returned to the cabin. The fire was low and content, crackling with the rhythm of an old song. He curled into bed with a contented sigh, feeling more than rested, feeling whole. As his eyes closed, he imagined the pines standing guard outside, tall and timeless, keeping the night gentle and the dreams slow. Chapter 5. Reflections of Still Water. The fifth day greeted Thomas with the hush of early fog rolling across the lake, thick and pearly, cloaking the world in softness. He rose before the sun had fully climbed above the treetops, his breath visible in the morning chill, his body wrapped in the comforting weight of stillness. The cabin seemed even quieter than usual, a kind of silence that felt like a presence rather than an absence, a silence that listened. With slow, deliberate movements, he brewed a cup of herbal tea and stepped out barefoot onto the porch. The wood was cool beneath his feet, slightly damp with dew. He leaned against the railing and watched the fog breathe lifting, curling, revealing glimpses of water and shoreline before folding them back into its veil. The world felt suspended, as if time itself was taking a long, deep breath. After a simple breakfast, he gathered a wool blanket and returned to the dock. There, he lay back, arms tucked beneath his head, and let his gaze drift across the sky. It was pale and endless, streaked with soft strokes of cloud like brush marks on a canvas. Every so often, a bird would pass overhead, its wings slicing the silence with elegant purpose. Thoughts came and went like the breeze, unhurried, unattached. He didn't try to hold on to them, just watched them rise and vanish like ripples in the water. By midday, the fog had lifted completely, and the lake had returned to its mirror-still state. The trees, the sky, even the scattered clouds reflected perfectly on its surface, so clear it was difficult to tell where the world ended and its reflection began. Thomas took the rowboat from the boathouse, its faded paint and worn oars carrying the gentle weight of many summers past. He pushed off quietly, the hull slicing the lake without a sound. With each slow pull of the oars, the cabin receded behind him, and the wide embrace of the lake opened around him like a page being turned. He didn't aim for anywhere in particular. The movement itself was enough. The steady rhythm of wood and water, the soft creak of the oarlocks, the way the sun warmed his shoulders and lit the ripples in soft gold. At the center of the lake, he paused. Letting the boat drift, he closed his eyes and tilted his face toward the sky. There was no sound, but his breath and the occasional splash of a fish beneath the surface. Time stretched long and thin, like sunlight across glass. Eventually, he rowed back, slower still than before, and tied the boat with quiet care. He sat at the water's edge, legs dangling over the dock, watching lily pads nod in the current and dragonflies balance delicately on their broad green surfaces. The simplicity of it all soothed something deep inside him, something that had gone quiet long ago. Later, he wandered the forest trails again, this time following the slope of the land toward a hidden meadow he hadn't yet explored. The trees opened gently into a clearing, filled with golden light and tall grass swaying like ocean waves. He lay back in the center of it all, arms outstretched, the scent of wildflowers drifting around him. A butterfly landed on his sleeve, stayed a moment, then fluttered away. He watched it go, then let his eyes close. The meadow cradled him as the sky slowly turned from blue to silver. That evening, he made a fire by the lakeshore. He didn't need its warmth, but he welcomed its flickering company. Sparks rose like tiny stars and disappeared into the night, and the scent of smoke mingled with the sweet dampness of the forest. He sat on a log and listened to the crickets, the soft splash of water, the faint breeze moving through distant branches. No words were spoken, yet everything was understood. The lake reflected the moon like it had been waiting for her all day. Thomas smiled, wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, and let the hush of night take him once more. Chapter 6. Into the Quiet. The sixth and final morning came with a stillness so complete it felt sacred. No wind stirred the branches. No birds called out yet. The lake was more than silent. It was holding its breath. Thomas awoke slowly, the weight of deep rest still wrapped around him like a second blanket. He sat at the edge of the bed, letting his feet touch the cool wood floor, his body sensing the subtle presence of change. The forest beyond the window remained unmoving, a tapestry of greens and silvers waiting to be noticed. He made tea without sound, careful not to disturb the peacefulness that filled every corner of the cabin. As he stepped outside, mug in hand, he noticed how the air had a different texture. It wasn't colder or warmer. It simply felt full, like a closing paragraph of a well-loved book. He walked to the lake and stood at the edge, watching the surface shimmer with the earliest light. A single fish jumped once, then disappeared, sending rings across the water like slow echoes. Everything was still, yet everything was alive. After finishing his tea, he wandered into the woods one last time, choosing no trail, guided only by instinct. The trees welcomed him without judgment or sound. He moved through their shadows, like a memory returning to its source. He touched trunks, ran his hand over moss, and paused to feel the way the sunlight filtered down in soft columns. In a small glade, he sat on a fallen log, watching as leaves danced slowly in the breeze that had finally returned. It wasn't a breeze that rushed or pulled. It merely passed through, brushing the world gently as if to say farewell. He stayed in that glade for a long while, watching light and shadow shift, listening to the forest speak in its quiet language. There was no urgency, no ticking clock, only presence, only the slow unfolding of now. When he returned to the cabin, the sun was higher and the birds had resumed their gentle calls. He packed his things slowly, not with reluctance, but with gratitude. Each item folded, each drawer closed, became a small gesture of respect. Before he left, he walked one last time to the dock. He stood there barefoot, looking out at the lake that had mirrored his every breath, his every silence. The water sparkled now, awake and welcoming, as if winking in approval. Thomas closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, the scent of pine, distant rain, and morning sun mixing in a perfect note. He didn't try to hold on to the feeling. He let it settle into him, soft and ungraspable, like a lullaby remembered in dreams. As he stepped away, the boards creaked beneath his feet one last time, and the lake, the trees, the sky all remained behind him, exactly as they had been, and forever changed. The forest didn't wave goodbye. It simply held him gently, then released. The road out of the valley was the same as the one that brought him in, yet it felt different beneath the tires wider somehow, more forgiving. The trees still lined it like sentinels, their branches casting dappled light across the windshield. He drove without music, windows down, letting the wind carry the last traces of pine and memory out across the hills. He didn't speak. He didn't think of where he was going. He simply breathed and drove and felt the hush of the forest still inside him. Behind him, the cabin remained, resting by the still lake beneath the whispering pines, holding the quiet like a promise for anyone who might need it again. And ahead, the road stretched open and calm, leading nowhere in particular, and exactly where he needed to be.